The world of rugby stopped turning for a moment when the news broke. JOE SCHMIDT, one of the most composed and methodical coaches the game has ever seen, a man who built his reputation on precision and emotional control, found himself in a hospital corridor facing every parent's worst nightmare. His son had been rushed to emergency care after suffering a severe epileptic episode, and the footage of Schmidt's tearful reaction reminded everyone that behind the tactical genius and the championship victories, there exists a father who bleeds just like the rest of us. This is not the story anyone wanted to tell. This is not the narrative that should accompany one of Australian rugby's most significant coaching appointments. But this is reality, raw and unfiltered, and it demands our attention not because it is sensational, but because it reveals something fundamental about the human cost of living life in the public eye while dealing with private tragedy. JOE SCHMIDT's journey to becoming the Wallabies head coach was supposed to be a triumphant homecoming of sorts. The New Zealand-born coach who had conquered European rugby with Leinster and led Ireland to unprecedented heights was handed the keys to Australian rugby's future. The expectations were enormous. The pressure was suffocating. The scrutiny was relentless. And through it all, SCHMIDT maintained his characteristic calm, his analytical approach, his unwavering focus on the task at hand. What the public did not see, what could not be captured in press conferences or post-match interviews, was the constant worry that accompanied SCHMIDT through every training session, every team meeting, every moment away from his family. His son's battle with epilepsy was not new. The condition had been part of the family's reality for years. But epilepsy is unpredictable, cruel in its randomness, and devastating in its impact on both the sufferer and those who love them. The incident that brought this private struggle into public view occurred during a particularly intense period of the rugby season. SCHMIDT was deep in preparation for a crucial test match, consumed by the tactical decisions and selection headaches that define international coaching. Then came the phone call that every parent dreads. His son had suffered a severe epileptic seizure. The situation was serious. An ambulance had been called. Hospital treatment was necessary immediately. What happened next revealed the man behind the coaching legend. SCHMIDT abandoned everything. The match preparation, the media obligations, the weight of national expectation, all of it became instantly irrelevant. He rushed to be with his son, and when cameras later captured him outside the hospital, the composed tactician had vanished. In his place stood a father, tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed by fear and helplessness. The images were difficult to witness. SCHMIDT, always so controlled, so measured in his public persona, was visibly shattered. His hands shook as he tried to compose himself. His eyes, which assessed countless opponents and devised intricate game plans, now reflected only anguish and terror. This was not a man concerned with rugby. This was a father confronting the fragility of his child's health and the limitations of his own ability to protect the person he loved most in the world. Epilepsy is a condition that affects approximately 50 million people worldwide, yet it remains poorly understood by the general public. The seizures can range from mild episodes that last mere seconds to severe convulsions that pose immediate danger to life. For families living with epilepsy, the constant vigilance required is exhausting. Every day carries the possibility of an episode. Every moment of normalcy exists against the backdrop of potential crisis. The psychological toll on both patients and their families cannot be overstated. For someone in JOE SCHMIDT's position, the challenges multiply exponentially. International rugby coaching demands total commitment. The travel schedule is brutal. The time away from family is extensive. The pressure to succeed is immense. Balancing these professional obligations with the need to be present for a child with a serious medical condition creates an impossible tension, one that SCHMIDT has navigated with remarkable grace until this moment when the walls finally came down. The response from the rugby community has been overwhelming in its support. Players, coaches, administrators and fans from across Australia and around the world have reached out with messages of solidarity and understanding. Former players who worked under SCHMIDT have spoken publicly about his character, describing a man who always prioritised humanity over results, who understood that rugby was just a game compared to the real battle some people face. Current Wallabies players have rallied around their coach, making it clear that the team stands united behind him during this crisis. The bond between Schmidt and his squad, already strong, has been reinforced by this shared experience of vulnerability. Rugby at its best creates families, and families show up when one of their own is hurting. The players have made it abundantly clear that they will do whatever is necessary to support their coach through this ordeal. Please, before we continue, do not forget to like and subscribe to Unpopular Australian Opinions. Your support allows us to keep bringing you the stories that matter in Australian sport. Australian rugby has also responded with compassion and flexibility. In a sporting landscape often criticised for its ruthlessness and its prioritisation of results over people, the organisation's handling of Schmidt's situation has been exemplary. They've made it clear that family comes first, that Schmidt will have whatever time and resources he needs, and that the pressure of the coaching role will not take precedence over his son's health and recovery. This stands in sharp contrast to previous eras, when coaches and players were expected to simply soldier on regardless of personal circumstances. The evolution toward recognizing the humanity of those involved in professional sport represents genuine progress, and Australian rugby deserves credit for demonstrating that values matter more than victories, at least in moments of genuine crisis. The broader conversation this incident has sparked about mental health, family, and the pressures of elite sport is one that Australian rugby needed to have. For too long, the culture of stoicism and emotional suppression has dominated. Coaches and players were expected to be machines, impervious to the struggles that affect ordinary people. Showing vulnerability was seen as weakness. Admitting to personal problems was career suicide. Joe Schmidt's tears have challenged that culture in the most powerful way possible. Here is a man at the absolute pinnacle of his profession, responsible for the performance of a national team, entrusted with restoring Australian rugby's reputation on the world stage, and he is crying openly because his son is sick. There is no shame in those tears. There is only humanity and the recognition that some things are infinitely more important than sport. The medical treatment Schmidt's son received appears to have stabilized his condition according to reports from sources close to the family. The seizure was serious and frightening, but the emergency response was swift and effective. The young man is reportedly recovering, though epilepsy management remains an ongoing challenge that will require continued medical supervision and lifestyle adjustments. For Joe Schmidt, the path forward involves finding a sustainable balance between his coaching responsibilities and his family obligations. This is not a problem with an easy solution. International rugby coaching is not a job that allows for part-time commitment. The Wallabies need their coach fully present, especially as they navigate a challenging period of rebuilding and development. But Schmidt's son needs his father, and that need supersedes everything. The question facing Australian rugby and Schmidt himself is how to create a working arrangement that honours both sets of obligations. Maybe it involves restructuring the coaching setup to provide Schmidt with more support. Maybe it means being flexible about his presence at certain events or training sessions. Perhaps it requires honest conversations about whether continuing in the role is viable given his family circumstances. What matters most is that the decision, whatever it ultimately is, prioritizes the well-being of Schmidt and his family. If that means stepping back from coaching, then so be it. If it means finding creative solutions that allow him to continue while being available for his son, then the rugby community should support that approach. The one thing that can't happen is Schmidt being forced to choose between his family and his career, because that is not a choice any person should have to make. This story has resonated so deeply because it reminds us of fundamental truths we often forget in our obsession with sporting success. Coaches are not robots. Players are not commodities. Behind every professional athlete and every sideline tactician stands a complete human being with families, fears, and struggles that have nothing to do with win-loss records or championship trophies. Schmidt breaking down in tears outside a hospital is not a sign of weakness. It is a demonstration of love, of priority, of understanding what truly matters when everything else is stripped away. His tears honor his son, validate the seriousness of epilepsy as a condition, and give permission to every other person struggling to balance professional success with personal crisis to acknowledge that sometimes we all break down,
and that is perfectly acceptable. Australian rugby will survive regardless of what happens next with Joe Schmidt's coaching tenure. The Wallabies will play their matches, win some, lose others, and continue the eternal cycle of hope and disappointment that define the sport. But Schmidt's son gets only one father, one person whose presence and support could make all the difference as he navigates life with epilepsy. In the end, this is not really a rugby story at all. It is a human story that happens to involve someone from the rugby world. It's about love, fear, vulnerability, and the recognition that no amount of professional success can compensate for failing the people we depend on most. Joe Schmidt understands this, even if it cost him everything he has worked towards. And that understanding makes him not weaker, but infinitely stronger than any tactical brilliance ever could.